Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going deep on privacy tech, something I know a lot of you have been asking about.
Yeah, definitely seems to be a hot topic these days.
For sure. And, it's easy to just feel kind of overwhelmed, right? Like every day there's another story about data breaches, online tracking, all that.
Yeah, it can feel pretty bleak sometimes.
Totally. But what if I told you, like, technology itself might actually be the key to, taking back our privacy?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to be digging into today. We're going to look at real-world stories, tools you can actually use, and even some pretty mind-blowing tech that's, like, still being developed.
Yeah, we've got a crazy stack of stuff for this deep dive. We've got research papers, articles, even firsthand accounts from people who are using privacy tech in like really intense situations.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. One thing that I've been particularly struck by is how encryption, which, always gets like demonized in the news, is actually helping people protect themselves.
Totally. It's like people think encryption is just for, like, criminals or something.
Right, exactly.
Well,
But it's actually helping people protect their privacy and even their lives.
that's such a good point. Technology is just a tool at the end of the day. It can be used for good or for bad.
Right, for sure.
And the last few decades have, definitely leaned heavily towards surveillance. But that doesn't mean that we're powerless, right?
Yeah, absolutely not.
This deep dive, I think, is really going to highlight how technology can be a super powerful weapon for taking back control of our digital lives.
Totally. That's what I find so exciting about this topic. It's not just all doom and gloom.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about actually empowering ourselves, taking control back.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into some real-world examples of how privacy tech is already making a difference.
Right.
One story that really stuck with me was about protesters in Iran using Signal to organize and communicate during internet shutdowns.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's really incredible, especially given how the government, there was actively trying to censor and ban platforms like Signal.
Yeah.
But the protesters weren't deterred. They found ways around it.
Yeah.
Like Signal actually provided instructions on how to set up proxy servers so people could bypass the restrictions.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a real testament to the power of technology to enable free speech, even in the face of oppression.
Totally, like a digital David and Goliath situation.
Exactly.
And it's happening all over the world. Our sources also talk about journalists in Mexico who are using encryption and private data storage to protect themselves and their sources while exposing corruption and cartel violence.
Yeah, for real, that's life or death stuff.
It really is.
They're putting their lives on the line to expose wrongdoing, and encryption is one of the tools that helps keep them safe.
It makes you realize how high the stakes are, for
Right.
sure. And then there's China with the Great Firewall blocking access to all sorts of platforms.
Yeah, it seems like every time I read about China, there's a new level of digital control being put in place.
Right. It's intense.
Yeah, it's a very controlled digital environment for sure. But even there, people are finding ways to get around the censorship.
Oh, really?
Yeah, using things like VPNs, Tor, encrypted messaging apps.
Wow, so they're still able to access information and connect with the outside world?
Exactly. It shows you that people all over the world are turning to privacy tech to resist control and, assert their right to information.
I love that. That's so hopeful. It's easy to get bogged down in the headlines, but this shows that people are fighting back and finding ways to take back their digital freedom.
Totally agree.
So let's switch gears a bit and talk about what we can all do right now to take control of our own privacy. Like, let's start with browsers.
Correct. Yeah.
I know there are privacy-focused browsers out there, but I haven't really made the switch. What am I missing out on?
Well, privacy-focused browsers have some key advantages over, your mainstream options.
Yeah.
Like, they block tracking pixels and scripts, which are basically these tiny pieces of code that websites use to track your browsing.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
They also often have features to combat fingerprinting, which is a more advanced way of tracking that builds a unique profile of your device.
I've heard of that too. It's like a digital fingerprint that can identify you even without cookies.
Exactly. And these browsers aim to disrupt that process,
Yeah.
making it much harder for websites to track you as you move around the web.
So it's all about making it harder for these companies to build up those detailed profiles of our online behavior.
Yep, exactly. It's a huge benefit, especially with how invasive targeted advertising has become.
It's not just ads, though, right? Those profiles can be used for all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Things like discriminatory pricing, manipulating the content you see, even surveillance by governments.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is. But choosing a privacy-focused browser is a simple but really effective step you can take.
Okay, I'm convinced. I'm switching browsers after this. What about search engines? We all use them every day, but the big ones are notorious for tracking everything.
For sure. But there are alternatives out there that don't log your searches or build profiles on you.
Really? Do they work as well as the big guys, though? I feel like a lot of people worry that privacy comes at the cost of functionality.
I get that, but honestly, the privacy-focused search engines are catching up pretty quickly in terms of functionality.
Okay, that's good to know.
They use different algorithms and indexing methods, but they're constantly improving. For most people, the trade-off in terms of search results is pretty minimal.
So you're saying it's a win-win.
I think so. You can find the info you need without sacrificing your privacy.
I like the sound of that. What about protecting our communications? Encrypted messaging apps are a big deal these days, but I'm a bit fuzzy on how they actually work.
It's actually pretty simple. Basically, they use cryptography to scramble your messages, so only the person with the right key can unlock them.
So like a sealed envelope that only the recipient can open?
Exactly. Even if the company that made the app wanted to read your messages, they couldn't.
Wow.
They just don't have the keys to decrypt them. Even if a government agency demanded access, they wouldn't be able to hand anything over.
That's a relief, especially these days when it feels like everyone's trying to listen in.
Right.
What about email? Can we get that same level of protection?
Absolutely. There are encrypted email platforms that work similarly to encrypted messaging apps, using end-to-end encryption to make sure only you and the recipient can read the messages.
So even giants like Gmail can't see what's in your emails.
Nope. It's a game changer for anyone who deals with sensitive info over email.
Totally. I'm starting to feel way more optimistic about all this. It's like we actually have tools to protect our privacy.
For sure. And we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about VPNs, private calendars, and all these decentralized platforms that are popping up.
There's a lot to cover.
There is.
Well, I'm excited to dive into all of that. But first, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good. All right, welcome back. Hope you're ready for some serious mind-blowing stuff.
Oh, I'm definitely ready. I was just skimming some of the research on these future technologies, and honestly, some of it just sounds like, I don't know, impossible. Like,
Right.
how can you even process data without actually seeing it?
Well, that's the beauty of homomorphic encryption.
Okay.
It's a complicated idea, but think of it like this. You've got a locked box, right? And inside is all this sensitive information.
Okay. Got it.
You want to let someone do calculations on that info,
Yeah.
but you don't want to open the box. That's what homomorphic encryption lets you do.
I kind of get it. But how does that work in the real world? It still seems kind of theoretical.
It's actually becoming a lot more practical, and the possibilities are huge.
Like what?
Well, take healthcare. Imagine doctors being able to analyze patient data, really sensitive stuff, without actually seeing any of the raw data,
That would be incredible.
right? They could spot trends, develop new treatments, do all this research without compromising anyone's privacy.
Yeah, right now it seems like every week there's another story about a data breach with health records.
Exactly. Homomorphic encryption could solve that problem.
Seriously, that's a game changer.
And it's not just healthcare. Think about finance. Imagine banks being able to assess risk, detect fraud, all that without ever actually seeing your transaction history.
Wow, okay, my mind is officially blown.
It's like having your cake and eating it too.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, what else you got? What else has you this excited about the future of privacy?
Well, how about this? Decentralized identity. Right now, we have to rely on, big institutions, governments, and corporations to verify who we are.
Yeah, that's how it works.
But with decentralized identity, you'd hold and manage your own digital credentials, using cryptography, of course.
So instead of the government giving me a driver's license, I'd have like a digital version that I control.
Exactly. You decide what information to share and who you share it with,
Wow, that would be huge.
right? Like, need to prove you're over 18 to get on a website.
Hmm.
You could do that without giving them your birthday.
That's wild. It feels so empowering,
It is. We wouldn't be at the mercy of these big institutions anymore.
What would that look like in the real world?
Well, think about access to financial services, especially for people who can't get traditional bank accounts.
Oh, yeah, like in developing countries where people don't have official ID.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Decentralized identity could help them participate in the global economy.
That would be incredible.
Right. It would also be a huge step forward for online security.
Ugh.
No more worrying about those massive data breaches from centralized databases.
That's true. Okay, before we go too far down the rabbit hole of like future tech, can we talk about something a little more, I don't know, everyday?
Like what?
Like those CAPI TCAJ tests, prove you're not a robot. Is there a way to get rid of those?
There might be, actually.
Yeah.
It all comes down to this concept called zero-knowledge proofs.
Zero knowledge proofs. That sounds
I
intense.
know, right? Like something out of a spy movie.
Okay, so what is it?
Well, imagine you need to prove to a website that you're human, but you don't want to give them any personal info.
Right.
A zero-knowledge proof lets you do that. You prove you have the secret knowledge to pass the test, but you don't reveal what that knowledge actually is.
It's like a secret handshake that only humans know, but we don't have to actually show it.
Exactly. And it's not just for CAPE-TCGs. Zero-knowledge proofs are being used to build more privacy-preserving authentication systems, digital signatures, even voting mechanisms.
So basically, it's a way to prove something without giving up sensitive information.
Exactly. It's all about building trust and security in a way that respects privacy. And the best part is, this tech is already being used in the real world.
It's amazing how far privacy tech has come.
Right. It's come a long way.
It's like we've gone from feeling totally helpless to being on the verge of a major shift.
I agree. And it's not just the tech itself. It's a cultural shift that's happening too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people are starting to understand how important privacy is, and they're demanding better practices from companies and governments.
I read this really interesting story about how people are pushing back against data collection at car dealerships.
Really?
Yeah, they're asking tough questions about what data is being collected, how it's being used, all that.
That's awesome. It's a perfect example of how consumers can actually drive change.
Totally. When we vote with our wallets, companies have to listen.
Right. And we're also seeing more privacy-focused laws and regulations being put in place.
So it's like everything's coming together. New technologies, people demanding change, and governments starting to take action.
Exactly. It's a perfect storm for privacy.
I love that. That's what makes me so optimistic. It's not just about individual actions, it's about a collective movement.
Couldn't agree more.
We're not powerless against surveillance. We can actually choose a different path.
We absolutely can.
Speaking of choices, we've still got a few more fascinating technologies to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, let's get into it. All right, so before the break, we were talking about how people are pushing back against data collection, even in places you wouldn't expect, like car dealerships.
It's pretty amazing, right? Like,
Yeah.
people are finally starting to get it.
Yeah, they're realizing how valuable their data is.
For sure. And they're not just sitting back and letting companies take it without asking questions.
Exactly. So what other trends are you seeing that give you hope for the future of privacy?
Well, one thing I'm really excited about is the focus on building privacy-focused infrastructure.
Infrastructure. What do you mean by that?
Well, we often think about privacy in terms of, individual tools and practices, right?
Yeah, like the apps we use and stuff.
But the underlying infrastructure of the internet itself plays a huge role too.
Oh, interesting. I haven't really thought about that before.
Yeah, it's kind of like the foundation everything is built on.
Right.
And if that foundation isn't solid, the whole thing can crumble, privacy-wise.
Okay, I'm starting to see what you mean. Can you give me an example?
Sure, take the domain name system, or DNS.
DNS.
Yeah, every time you visit a website,
Mm-hmm.
your device uses DNS to translate that human-readable domain name, like google.com, into a numerical IP address that computers understand.
So it's like a phone book for the internet, connecting names to numbers.
Exactly. But in the traditional system, your internet service provider controls those DNS servers, which means they can see every website you visit.
Oh, wow.
It's like having someone looking over your shoulder every time you browse the web.
That's not a good feeling.
Definitely not. But luckily, there's a privacy-focused solution, decentralized DNS.
Decentralized. So instead of one central phone book, there are many.
Exactly. It's distributed across a whole network, making it much harder for any one entity to track or censor internet activity.
That's pretty clever. So it's like a network of phone books all working together.
Yep. And while decentralized DNS is still in its early stages, it has huge potential.
It's amazing how much innovation is happening like at every level of the internet.
Totally. And that includes the intersection of AI and privacy.
AI and privacy. Isn't AI usually seen as a threat to privacy? Like all those facial recognition systems and stuff?
Yeah, AI definitely gets a bad rap when it comes to privacy. But it really depends on how we choose to develop and use it.
Okay, how so?
Well, While AI can be used for surveillance, it can also be a powerful tool for protecting privacy.
Really?
Yeah. For example, there's this thing called local AI processing.
Local AI processing.
Basically, instead of sending your data to the cloud to be processed by a big centralized AI,
Right.
the AI runs right on your device.
So like on my phone or computer?
Exactly. This could totally change how we interact with AI-powered apps and services.
I can see that. Like imagine a voice assistant that understands you perfectly, but doesn't send any of your voice data to the cloud.
Right? Or an AI-powered photo editor that enhances your pictures without ever uploading them to a server.
That would be amazing. Are there any other ways AI can be used to protect our data?
Absolutely. There are also privacy-focused AI models, both cloud-based and decentralized, that are designed with data protection in mind.
So they're built from the ground up with privacy as a priority.
Exactly. They use techniques like differential privacy and federated learning to minimize the amount of data that needs to be shared.
That sounds pretty technical.
They are. But the main point is they allow for analysis and learning without compromising individual privacy.
So it's like instead of feeding all this personal data into one big AI, these techniques let us get insights without putting our privacy at risk.
Exactly. And some researchers are even exploring how to use AI to actually fight surveillance.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, like one idea is to use generative AI to create noise that messes with those data brokers.
Noise.
Yeah, like digital clutter that makes it harder for them to build accurate profiles of people.
So it's like using AI to jam the surveillance machine.
Pretty much. And there are other possibilities too. AI could help analyze and block privacy leaks on devices, giving users more control over their data.
Okay, so we could actually use AI to make our devices more private.
Exactly. And who knows what other privacy-enhancing applications we'll come up with in the future.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about all the possibilities, especially considering how pessimistic we often feel about technology and privacy.
I know, right? It's a good reminder that technology itself isn't good or bad. It's all about how we use it.
Right. And it sounds like we're moving in the right direction.
I think so too.
Yeah.
We're starting to see a real shift in how people think about and value privacy.
And that brings us back to the idea of a privacy culture, right?
Exactly. Technology is just one piece of the puzzle. We need a fundamental change in our attitudes and values.
Yeah, like we need to start demanding better privacy practices from companies and governments.
Totally. And we need policymakers to create laws that actually protect our digital rights.
Right, and we need the people who are building these technologies to prioritize privacy from the start.
Absolutely. It's a collective effort.
So it's a call to action for all of us.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in shaping a more privacy-respecting future.
It's inspiring to think that we're not just helpless bystanders.
We're not. We have the power to make a difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that technology can be a tool for liberation, not just oppression. We have the power to choose a privacy-first future.
But that means taking action, right?
Exactly. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it. We need to embrace privacy tech, support its development, and push for policies that protect our digital rights.
It's about making conscious choices every day to protect our privacy.
That's a big part of it for sure.
Well, that's a really empowering message. It's a reminder that we have agency, we have choices, and we can create a future where privacy thrives.
Absolutely. And it's not just about protecting ourselves. It's about building a better world for everyone.
That's a fantastic point. Well, I want to thank you for taking us on this incredible journey through the world of privacy tech.
It was my pleasure.
I know I've learned a ton, and I hope our listeners feel informed and empowered too.
Me too.
So, to everyone listening, stay curious, stay informed, and stay private. Until next time.